Okay, let's try something different.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Sarcophagi here. Today I just wanted to give a basic rundown on the introduction to deck building. It's something that I think a lot of people nowadays don't really know much about. It's really easy to go on Tempo Storm's website and just look at the meta snapshot and then take some cancerous deck and run with it. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. It's a way to play. But with the new expansion coming out, the new adventure, a lot of people will be wanting to experiment with new decks and try some goofy stuff, see if it works. And you may not have as much fun as you think you will if you're getting slaughtered. So what I figured I'd do is just kind of give a rundown on how to build the basic deck archetypes. That way, if you know kind of the formula you're looking for, then you can go in and experiment and maybe come out with some very viable options. Alright, so most people are familiar with the 5 major deck archetypes. You've got aggro, mid-range, control, tempo, and combo. So what I'm going to do is talk about the 4 proponents, the 4 major types of cards you need to include in any deck, and then kind of break down by each of those deck archetypes examples of what those cards may be, and basically what percentage of that deck needs to constitute cards like those. So the 4 card types that we're going to break this down into are, first you got win condition. Win condition cards are the cards that by themselves are able to essentially win the game for you. You've got your support cards, which this is honestly the most difficult type to describe, but I mean, you never want any cards that are just completely filler in your deck, but essentially support are something that don't fit into the other categories. What they do is they help you get to your win condition, but by themselves, they may come across as a bit weak per the mana cost to be able to win the game for you. You've got your sustainment cards. Sustainment is anything that's going to provide you with a resource of some type, maybe card draw, maybe healing, something that basically just keeps you in the game. And then finally, we've got protection, and protection could be your taunts, it could be armor. That also kind of varies. Maybe a weapon would constitute protection, but it's a way that you're able to just defend yourself from the enemy's win condition and from the onslaught of support cards your enemy will be playing. Alright, so the first particular deck archetype we're going to break down is aggro. Everyone's no doubt run into an aggro deck. The aggro deck we're going to use here as an example is going to be the ever popular aggro shaman. The idea with an aggro deck is to grab board control from the very beginning of the game and never lose it. If you never lose it, you're able to use just a complete army of minions to waste down your opponent's HP before they're able to retake the board. With that being said, the win condition, for example, for an aggro shaman could be Flame Wreath Faceless. Now, the card by itself wouldn't necessarily win in any given game, but because you're able to hold the board, your win condition can be a smaller minion. Not that 7/7 small, but 4 mana, not what a control deck would consider a win condition. Nevertheless, that's what you would constitute as the win condition in an aggro deck. As far as support goes, I'm with Tunnel Trog here. Tunnel Trog is something that I guess you could let it run away and it would win the game, but it's something you can play from the very beginning, and you can play basically any time throughout the game, and the rest of your cards are going to support it via the overload mechanic. Talking sustainment, you've got Sir Finley Murgleton. This one is kind of obscure because of the fact that an aggro deck by nature doesn't have a ton of card draw inherently. And so with aggro shaman, Finley is something that you could play and maybe get life tap or something like that in order to basically keep drawing cards. You could also get, I guess, the hunter hero power, and then you'd have sustainment in that you would never run out of the ability to ping your opponent's face for 2. And then finally, you've got protection, which here, Feral Spirit, both doubles as something that you can use to attack your opponent incessantly. It also gives you 2/2/3 taunts, which at turn 3 is pretty substantial. So in that way, all these cards are able to provide an aggressive play in the game, but at the same time, they are able to fulfill another purpose for the deck. Overall, for an aggro deck, using this one as an example, and then kind of give or take 1, for win condition, you want to include about 3 to 5 cards in your deck. For support, you want 18 to 20 cards. For sustainment, you want 2 to 4, and then for protection, you want 3 to 5 cards. Okay, so the next archetype is midrange. I guess some could argue that midrange is even a more straightforward type of deck than aggro, in that you get a curve throughout the entire game. So you are able to sometimes deal with aggro, and at the same time, you're able to mount enough pressure to take down a control deck, even in the late game. So the deck we're going to use as an example here is going to be Midrange Hunter. Not as popular as it used to be. Midrange Shaman's probably more popular, but I wanted to use examples all from different classes. That way we could just cover the broadest amount of information and options out there. As far as Midrange Hunter goes, win condition for this game could be Call of the Wild. Everyone's run into this card. It can be absolutely life reaffirming or at the same time life shattering. And even though it doesn't always win by itself, the amount of firepower that comes from this card is absolutely monumental. Talking about support, I put Flame Juggler here. This is just about as vanilla as it gets, but at the same time, people have argued that it could be broken at times. So it's an example of something you can play at pretty much any point, especially early when you want it, but just filler minions, essentially. Talking sustainment, I put King's Elic. King's Elic is kind of an indirect form of sustainment, but in a way, it's capable of drawing you a card into your hand that you could hopefully use soon. And so in that way, you're getting card draw, ideally, using a minion that you'd also want to play just because of its stats. Protection, we got Houndmaster here. Houndmaster, gives you a taunt and buffs up a minion. So in that way, it also, gives you a stronger board, and the taunt can serve as a way to upset your opponent's plans. Alright, so just to run down the mid-range card numbers, we're looking at 4 to 6 cards for your win condition, 13 to 15 cards of support, 3 to 5 cards of sustainment, and 6 to 8 for protection. Alright guys, so third here we're going to be looking at one of my favorite deck archetypes, which is Control. I've got the Reno lock here, the Reno Cthulhu lock. Blast to play, but if you're just asking me, as much as you may get crushed by aggro all the time, Control is always the way to go. With that plug being aside, first of all, we'll look at the win condition. You've got Cthulhu. I think that goes without saying. Old gods are incredibly powerful, and your entire deck is built around bolstering this guy so that you can play him and just win the game on the spot. As far as support, you've got Twilight Elder. Here you're talking about a 3/4 for 3, which is obviously just good stats for that cost. But at the same time, the card is able to buff your win condition. Self-explanatorily, that's support. Sustainment, you've got Reno Jackson. Reno by himself heals you to full, so that's pretty much the definition of sustainment right there. And then protection, Twin Emperor Veclor. Now, there's a lot of protection cards in a control deck, but Twin Emperor himself is able to give you 2/4/6 taunts, and so that card I think exemplifies what in a Cthulhu or Handlock deck will keep you alive longer. Alright, so running down the numbers here, you're looking at about 4 to 6 cards of win condition. I think less so in the Cthulhu variant itself, but in other control decks you may see more win condition cards. And it's worth noting that the win conditions in a control deck are going to be like vastly more powerful than the win conditions in an aggro or mid-range deck. That goes without saying. I just think it's worth noting because of the fact that that goes to show how the idea of a win condition can be different depending on the deck you're playing. So don't feel bad if building an aggro or mid-range deck, you're thinking, oh, what's my win condition going to be here? It doesn't have to be an 8 or 9 mana card like it would need to be in a control deck. Talking support, you want about 7 to 9 support cards. Sustainment, you want 5 to 7 cards. And then protection, you want 10 to 12 cards, because otherwise you're not going to last very long. Alright, so we've just got 2 decks left. These 2 are slightly less straightforward than the aggro, mid-range, or control decks, in that those ones can be kind of viewed just by what their mana curve is like, whereas Tempo goes for an actual concept. The best Tempo deck probably uses Tempo Mage. Tempo Mage is just, it's been out there forever. And it just straightforward, follows the tempo rules. So talking win condition for Tempo Mage, you've got Ragnaros, at least in this current variant. Win condition is kind of obscure for Tempo in that you're not often going to play a big minion, but since you're able to usually fit Ragnaros in the deck list at the end, if your opponent's exhausted all of their resources trying to get rid of the board that you've built and trying to prevent you from just killing them outright, Ragnaros is something that you can throw out there and then just kind of there's nothing left that your opponent has to deal with him. Um, Support, I've got Sorcerer's Apprentice. That supports you by giving your spells, one lower mana cost, so you can cast a lot more of them. And it's also just a 3/2 for 2. Sustainment, we've got Arcane Intellect. That's come up in most mage deck lists, and just drawing cards. It's as straightforward as it gets. And then Protection, Mirror Image, being 2 taunt minions that are very cheap. So once again, it's a little bit harder to explain tempo. The idea itself is pretty straightforward, and if you're watching this video, you probably already understand it. But whenever you're thinking about building a tempo deck, it really comes down to what the ratio of your cards is going to look like compared to those other archetypes. So in tempo, you want probably 1 to 3 cards for your win condition. It's much more minimal. For support, you want 15 to 17 cards. For sustainment, you want 4 to 6. This one I actually had a debate about a little bit because of the fact that a lot of the time people don't have much card draw at all in a tempo deck. Protection, you want maybe 6 to 8 cards. Now it's important to remember here that in sustainment and protection, a lot of cards are able to double up in what they are doing for you. In that, I guess you could view like Fireball or Frostbolt as a protection card. But in this case, I didn't see it that way. I just see it as support because it's able to do so many different things throughout the game, and it could just win it for you. And finally here, what we've got is the combo deck. It's actually pretty straightforward to describe. Everyone knows combo deck's just a one-turn kill, essentially. And so right now, you're most likely to run into the combo OTK Worgen Warrior. Absolutely hate this deck. In fact, just talking about this and using this as an example is getting me mad already. But it's pretty straightforward. As far as a win condition, you've got your Raging Worgen. It goes without saying, as soon as you see that card get played, you know that either your opponent is very poor at math or you're going to lose immediately. Support, you got Emperor Thaurissan. Now, this is one of those more obscure support cards to describe, but if you think about it, he's essentially enabling your entire hand to be comboed. So even though there are many other support cards out there, since combo decks focus entirely on just drawing your combo and playing it, I think he's probably the best example in the game of a support card for a combo deck. Sustainment, you've got Battle Rage. Obviously, you just want all your stuff to take damage and draw you a crap load of cards. And then Protection, you got Execute, which doesn't really do anything for you other than kill an opponent's minion, which is the definition of Protection. Alright, so as far as the components broken down in this deck, you want about 6 to 8 cards for your win condition. Now, this one's kind of notable to talk about because in this case, the win condition is a literal combo. So you want your combo to be anywhere from probably 6 to 8 different cards. Not saying that it takes 6 to 8 cards to combo together and win, but that you want to include 6 to 8 cards. That way, maybe 2 or 3 different cards you have duplicates of. Support, you want 6 to 8 as well. Sustainment is definitely your biggest category here. You want 9 to 11 sustainment cards in this case. Maybe for healing isn't as much a focus in this deck in particular, but for card draw. And then protection, you want about 5 to 7 cards. That could debatably be higher, but I'm just doing it based off of an estimation I saw from what the biggest deck for that archetype is right now. And so I guess, I don't know, I could see it as having more protection cards, to be honest. If you were like a priest or something like that, you'd want to be able to keep yourself alive. But anyways, those are the 5 major deck archetypes, and those are the 4 types of cards that I've essentially, I guess, just kind of categorized in my head of how you can break down what cards you're putting in your deck. I guess you could break it down shorter, and you could certainly expand the list, but as far as just keeping things fairly simplified, I know everyone's going to want to be super interested in deck building with the new cards coming out, myself included, and you want to maximize your time and have a rational thought process going into it so that whatever you create is potentially viable. But anyways, thanks for watching the video. I'd love to put more out on this topic, but don't have so much time right now. So if everyone's interested, feel free to comment or subscribe, and hopefully I'll be able to put out more content like this in the future. Thanks.